In this video, we'll be going through both some better and bad parts of Detroit. In the first half, we'll be going through the Mexicantown neighborhood, in which, for Detroit standards, isn't a bad neighborhood. Not saying that it's great, but it's a part of a handful of southwest Detroit neighborhoods that still have some sort of urban density. The second half of this video will be going through a largely abandoned part of the city where there's hardly any streets that look nice, and you have several spots where it looks like you're in an urban prairie. This will be my fifth video on the city of Detroit. In this video I go through Mexicantown and other areas that are within southwest Detroit. Pretty much everywhere that is south of Tireman, west of 96, north of 75, and east of Livernois. To the left, you can see the Fisher Freeway, which most people today just call I-75. In the 1960s, the freeway bulldozed a good chunk of southwest Detroit's residential blocks. Today, it separates Mexicantown from Corktown, and you only have Vernor Highway and Michigan Avenue to connect the two neighborhoods, plus the Bagley Street pedestrian bridge. If you look at historical aerial photos of the Mexicantown and Corktown neighborhood dating back to 1951, you can't even tell where I-75 was built, as the area is full of dense urban blocks, which is pretty crazy to imagine. Today, this area might be considered dense by Detroit standards, but it's certainly not at the level as it was in the 1950s. If you're interested in seeing more of that, I encourage you to look up historicalaerials.com. I'm hesitant to show the screenshots from that site in my videos due to the website's copyright policies, but if you like maps and you like seeing how things have changed over time, you might be like me and end up looking at that site for hours just to satisfy your curiosity. However, with Detroit being the Motor City, a car-friendly region was inspired, and Detroit has some of the oldest urban freeways in the country. It's also the largest metro area in the country today, without a regional mass transit system, and no, the Smart Bus doesn't count. Nor does the 2.5-mile-long people mover that circles downtown, and neither does the M1 streetcar line that goes from downtown to midtown. Make sure to drop a like for that amazing insight. Speaking of dropping likes for amazing insights, make sure to also leave a comment and subscribe, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also make sure to hit that notification bell so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy checking out some of the featured playlists on this channel. Videos on other places like what you'll see here can be found in my Detroit playlist, my American Hoods playlist, or in my Michigan playlist. Last but not least, if you can't get enough of me on here, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. So you might have heard of Chinatown in San Francisco, or Chinatown in New York, or Little Italy in Philadelphia. Detroit has Mexicantown. Most of southwest Detroit has strong Hispanic roots, as the city saw thousands of Mexican immigrants move in. Wait, hold up, is that a tractor? Well, anyway, southwest Detroit first saw Mexican immigrants move into the area around 1915, right when the Industrial Revolution began. Detroit had thousands of jobs available through the auto plants. At the time, Detroit offered a better life than the racism that they experienced while working in the sugar beet fields of Texas and the political unrest within their native country. And now we're interrupted again, okay. Well, where was I? Okay, well, most businesses within Mexicantown are off of Vernor Highway, which is the main drag that we were just on. When you look at most maps today, Mexicantown is labeled as a very small portion of land within southwest Detroit. Most people refer to Mexicantown as a much larger area than just this. You'll understand when I drive Vernor Highway from I-75 to Livernois later in the video that the Hispanic influence is felt throughout a much larger portion of southwest Detroit. You can even sense the Hispanic culture in the Springwells neighborhood, which is further southwest from here. For a video on Springwells, make sure to look for it on my Detroit playlist. That is, once you're done watching this video, of course. After the original wave of Mexican immigrants during the 1920s came through, other waves came through in the 80s and the 90s. Today, Southwest Detroit is unique in the fact that it remains largely Hispanic. Other immigrant groups such as the Polish, Italians, and Chaldeans have left their inner-city neighborhoods, with most now residing in the suburbs. This is Grand Boulevard, which is built in a ring around downtown Detroit. In 1913, Grand Boulevard resembled what was the outer limits of Detroit at the time. Detroit has several of these boulevards, and back in the early 20th century, these boulevards were some of the more desirable areas to build a house. Unlike a city like Chicago, Detroit doesn't have a clean layout of neighborhoods. Southwest Detroit might be the only part of the city that's left that supports multiple traditional urban neighborhoods. Other parts of the city will have a single street that runs for several blocks, and they'll call it a historic neighborhood, but traditional urban neighborhoods are much larger in size than just a single street that goes for several blocks. For the purposes of researching stats, I'm going to call this area Southwest Detroit, which is home to just under 20,000 residents, and the median household income is $28,000 per year. Only 9% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $61,000. The poverty rates are extremely high, ranging from the high 30s to the low 40s. The public schools are Detroit public schools, so they're not very good. The crime rates here are lower than what you'll see in some other residential parts of Detroit, but they're still pretty high, as both the violent and property crime rates are triple that of the national average rates. However, if the city can continue to head down the same path that it's been on in recent years, maybe this area can build off of the nearby momentum in Corktown. I'm not saying that it will or that it won't, but it's a realistic hope. Next, I head towards Bagley Street, which is the other main street for Mexicantown. Even though it's only a couple of blocks long, you can see that it has some good potential as there are quite a few nice Mexican restaurants. They call this stretch of Bagley Detroit's first shared street. There's room for only a few parked cars on each side, and there's hardly any room for two-way automobile traffic. The idea is for it to be more pedestrian and bicycle friendly, and to me, if anything, it looks more so like a nice setup for festivals. Speaking of festivals, every year, Mexicantown holds a Cinco de Mayo parade down Vernor Highway. For those who don't know, Cinco de Mayo is a Mexican holiday that is held on May 5th, as Cinco de Mayo translates to the 5th of May. It celebrates Mexico's defeat of the French Empire in 1862. The parade is a big deal for the community every year, as it brings in tourists and it brings in revenue to the local restaurants. As you've been able to see, Mexicantown has its interesting parts, but just like the rest of Detroit, you have some overgrown vacant lots with trash on the sides of the street, and your fair share of abandoned homes. From here, we start heading down Vernor Highway, and we take it all the way down to Livernois. Along the way, you'll see more signage written in Spanish than you will see written in English. Up ahead, we'll be going through the West Vernor Junction Historic District, which is between Lansing and Calvary Streets along Vernor Highway. The district was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2002, and there's another historic district along Vernor further southwest in the Springwells neighborhood that I talked about in my Springwells video. Vernor is one of the few original commercial thoroughfares in the city that hasn't seen extreme blight. Of course, you see some empty buildings and lots here and there, but compared to the rest of the city, this looks pretty decent. You might have noticed all of the street art that's on display. Really, you can see art murals throughout much of Detroit these days, but in Mexicantown, it's to preserve the Latino culture. Despite all the places to buy some tacos around here, you still have some empty old buildings that could use a facelift. To the left is the Most Holy Redeemer Church, which at one point was the largest Roman Catholic parish in North America. The church was built in 1921 at a time when this neighborhood was occupied by mostly Irish immigrants. The church is at the center point of the West Vernor Junction Historic District. Looks like a big part of the church there is boarded up. A lot of older buildings to the right here. Well, hope you don't mind, but I'm gonna go drop off some clothes here at the donation center, so be right back. See? Told you I'd be right back. Vernor Highway, by the way, is named after the first licensed pharmacist in Michigan, James Vernor. Vernor is famous for introducing his ginger ale to the world, which is called Vernors. I personally have only seen Vernors on the shelves at grocery stores in Michigan and in other areas that are close to Michigan, such as northern Indiana and Ohio, but when I talked about this in my Springwells video, many viewers commented about seeing Vernors stocked on the shelves in places as far away as Tennessee and the Carolinas. In Michigan, Vernors is a beverage that is seen at the same level as Coca-Cola. From here, I skip the video ahead down Livernois until I turn onto Lafayette as I make my way towards Clark Park. To the right is I-75, and on the other side of I-75 is the construction of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, which is taking place in Detroit's Delray neighborhood. The bridge is expected to be completed in late 2023, and it will relieve traffic on the Ambassador Bridge, which is currently the busiest border crossing between the United States and Canada. The towers on the Gordie Howe Bridge will be over 700 feet high, being nearly as tall as the Renaissance Center in downtown, which today is Detroit's tallest building. To learn more about the Gordie Howe International Bridge, make sure to check out my video on Delray. You could say that Junction Street is the main north and south drag through the heart of Mexicantown. However, soon we will be at Clark Park, which today is one of the few functional large parks within the residential areas of Detroit. So yes, Clark Park. There aren't too many parks in Detroit that actually serve the purpose of a neighborhood park. Most of Detroit's neighborhood parks appear to be open grass prairies today. Clark Park was actually closed in the 1990s due to the city cutting its budget, but a nonprofit saved the park from closing completely. Just this year, Mayor Mike Duggan announced a $3.3 million project to upgrade the park, which started in September of 2021 and is expected to be completed in the summer of 2022. Along with that, multiple renovations of older residential buildings in the neighborhood have been completed over the past year. Unlike previous mayors of Detroit, such as Kwame Kilpatrick, who used city credit cards to buy expensive wines, massages, and fancy dining, Detroit's current mayor seems to be putting the money back into the community. Hopefully these efforts can continue for years and decades to come, because that's what it's going to take to bring Detroit back. Unless Detroit becomes the next city where young professionals and hipsters from all over want to flock to Detroit for whatever reason, like they did with Denver and Austin, Texas over the past couple of decades, Detroit is going to have to do everything the right way for a very long time in order to change its reputation and stop the population decline. And as we've already seen this street, I skipped the video ahead yet again. To the left, you can see another view of the Holy Redeemer Church. For now, I'm going to continue to drive through some of the northern residential areas of Mexicantown before heading north of the railroad tracks where we enter some of the more sketchy hoods. You can always check out the timestamps down below if you want to skip the video ahead. Not sure what this old warehouse used to be, but it's one of the hundreds of abandoned warehouses that line the streets of Detroit today. And on this side of the tracks, you see a lot more urban blight than what you saw in Mexicantown. Yeah, looking pretty empty now. Yep, empty lots, overgrown with weeds where houses once stood, the effects of dozens of devil's nights, extreme crime, high city taxes, poor services, and overall poor quality of life offered by the city for its residents over decades worth of time. Oh, hey there, girl. Oh yeah, go on, right ahead. Yeah, your life is a lot more important and you have to get to your place. So yeah, go ahead.
I see how you only played that music when you're around black people. That must mean that you're a racist.
Dude, that was a white girl.
Oh, was it? Let me go back and delete that comment real quick.
Don't be calling me a racist fool. Anyway, back here you just have a bunch of sad-looking homes. Grand Boulevard ain't so grand looking today. At least they're mowing the median and doing what they can to make the place look as decent as possible. Well, let's talk about crime. As we all know, Detroit has been ranked as the most violent city in the United States more often than not over most of our lifetimes. Detroit really started to get dangerous in the 1960s when riots broke out in the city over what people believed to be racial injustice. We can talk more specifically about those riots when I go past the spot where the 12th Street riots occurred in a later video. For now, I wanted to talk about the crime that affects the city today. Here is a list of the most dangerous cities. Depending on where you get your information from, the order that these cities rank could vary, but you'll see that these cities will be on nearly every list of the top 10 most dangerous cities in the country. Gang violence continues to be a problem in Detroit, along with gun violence, drug usage, prostitution, and various property crimes such as stealing cars, vandalism, and robberies. The times that you don't want to find yourself in Detroit alone would be on the summer nights. I guess criminals don't like the cold weather and they decide to stay inside. But in Detroit, most recently, much of the crime that you'll see in the news has centered around car meets where dudes with small male parts will spin around and do donuts in the middle of intersections. Sometimes crowds of people will block off the freeways and the city limits and do donuts on the Lodge or 94. You also see a lot of news for freeway shootings. People have already just gotten used to the homicides, unfortunately, so nobody's shocked about those stories anymore. It's not as bad as it used to be here, as crime has slowly continued to drop down to lower numbers. People will say that it was truly a danger zone throughout the 80s and 90s. Many of the major cities in the country saw their peaks in violent crime during that era. From the 90s up until the time that George Floyd was murdered, we hadn't seen a large uptick in violent crime rates across the country. Anyways, the violent crime rates in Detroit used to be way above cities like St. Louis, Baltimore, and Memphis, but today, all four of these cities are looked at as being the worst in the country on the same level. On a positive note, if you want to look through rose-colored glasses, Detroit was one of the few large cities in America to not defund the police, and Detroit actually added money to its police budget by 4%. We all know that that number needs to be way higher than 4%, but resources within Detroit's police force have been limited for a long time, as the city notoriously has had the reputation of response times to 911 calls taking up to an hour or longer. Today, response times on average with the latest data given to us say that it's about 40 minutes per 911 call. But I'm supposed to be talking about the positives here, right? So back to the positives. In response to George Floyd, Detroit was one of the few large American cities to not see the peaceful protests turn violent, which was surprising to many.
I wasn't surprised at all. We have a great community of people here in Detroit. Who do you think we are?
Oh yeah, come on, don't lie. You were surprised. Anyway, I've been to downtown Detroit quite a bit over the last 5 years, and they always have police officers patrolling every corner of downtown seemingly every night. It's much different out in these parts of the city, where most people just refer to as the neighborhoods. Downtown, Midtown, and Corktown combined are like a completely different city by themselves. We got the Sampson Weber Leadership Academy to the right. Hopefully it's able to produce some future community leaders, because this place will definitely need them. For many years, Detroit has seen more arsons than any other U.S. city. For 30 years or so, quite a few residents in Detroit took part of a tradition that was called Devil's Night, which was held on the eve of Halloween each year. The worst year for Devil's Night was in 1984, when over 800 fires were set throughout the city. Reports say that the following morning saw a layer of smoke hovering over the city, and those fires would be from people lighting up cars, dumpsters, or abandoned buildings. Anyway, Devil's Night has died down over the years. The city put together a plan in 1995 where volunteers patrolled their neighborhoods in attempts to limit the vandalism. Curfews were set in place and bans were made on portable gas containers. The city called the effort Angel's Night, and the city saw its fires cut down from around 300 a year to 150 a year. 2011 was the last year that saw over 100 fires, and these days Halloween Eve is nothing but an average day for the city's firefighters. I mean, that could just mean that vandals are running out of abandoned buildings to set on fire, as much of the city is vacant lots, but unfortunately today, Detroit still sees more arsons than any other U.S. city, as it sees 3 times as many as the city that's in second place, which is Memphis, Tennessee. Anyway, to the right you have something, or what used to be something. This plant was still in use when I filmed this video, but at the time of me uploading this video, Coca-Cola had shut down their Detroit operations after moving to Grand Rapids in October of 2021. Their reasoning was an old facility with outdated water supply and parking. And this street here looked awful when I came through in May of 2021. Wouldn't be surprised if the city has already come through to bulldoze the abandoned homes. To the right here, you have what used to be Sampson Elementary School. The school opened in 1911 and it closed in 2006. And to the left is yet again another view of the abandoned Sampson Elementary School. It's just so crazy to see so many empty blocks. You can only imagine what this street used to look like with buildings on both sides. Hard to know if it was a commercial thoroughfare here or if it was residential, but nonetheless, it just looks very eerie. If I upset you in this video by talking about the bad things of Detroit throughout the second half of this video, just remember that I said quite a few good things about the Mexicantown neighborhood during the first half. Also, my next several Detroit videos are going to be showing the best parts of the city, which is downtown, midtown, Rivertown, Belle Isle, and News Center. So get ready to put on those rose-colored glasses. And if you enjoyed this video, I appreciate you for watching, and if you don't mind, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos defeat the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Other videos like what you saw here can be found in my Detroit playlist, my American Hoods playlist, or in my Michigan playlist. We'll see you next time. Peace!